Hi, I'm Sally McDonough. Welcome to LBA's Intro to Dough. Today, we're going to be working with croissant dough. Sometimes your croissants look perfect, and sometimes they don't. These are ham and cheese filled croissants. So, if you look at this one, this dough wasn't handled properly. You want to always take out just as much as you need, and then you need to close the bag back up. If you don't do that, you're going to have this funny kind of mottled look because they're getting freezer burned. So close up that bag. Now, the other problem this one has is I'm going to teach you how to tuck the ends in so your filling doesn't spill out and burn along the edges. That'll be in the shaping part. And in the proofing part, this one is a little bit underproofed and it was a little underbaked, so you don't have that nice flaky golden look. You really don't want any white in your croissant pastries. So let's get started. This is a 15 by 22 sheet of thawed croissant dough. We've let it sit out for about 10 to 15 minutes at room temperature, cold and pliable. So I'm gonna throw a little bit of flour on top because I don't want it to stick. And our dough is over 20% butter. So what I want to do with this dough is I want to roll it to about 16 by 24. That way I can get nice, even rectangles. Doesn't hurt to roll it a little bit. You really never want to go under about 3/8 of an inch because we've got a lot of laminated layers in here. Dough, butter, dough, butter. If you roll it too thin, it's just not going to rise correctly. So this is another little tip. When you're making anything that's either rolled up, like let's say we were going to make croissant cinnamon rolls, which actually are fabulous. You just put a cinnamon roll filling in the croissant dough. When you're shaping your piece of dough, however long you go is how many you're going to get, and however wide you go is how big they'll be. So that's a little tip when you're doing some production work. This dough is so buttery, it's really easy to kind of get the fever and over roll it. So I want to be careful that I'm not doing that. Like all of our yeast doughs, the most accurate way to know how tall it was so it's going to rise perfectly is to measure a single dough layer before you bake it. And we're looking at about 3/8 of an inch, so we want that just under doubled when we proof it. So I'm gonna remember that, it's about 3/8 of an inch. So what I'm gonna do now is cut it in half so I can make both ham and cheese roll-ups in an oblong shape and in the traditional croissant shape. So I'm gonna turn this sideways, and I'm going to get 2 rows of them. So I'm going to make my own triangles. Now, what we're going to do is we're just going to go up, down, up, down, up. At first, it can be a little intimidating, so I suggest you mark at about 2.5 and about 5. And then we're going to mark down here again. That would be a 10. That gives you kind of so you get a feel for where you're going. So I'm just gonna go up and down and up and down and up. And I'll have a couple of scrap pieces on the end. And I'm gonna do the same thing here. Up and down and up and down and up. So there I have my triangles. And I'm actually just going to work with a couple of them. So I'm going to set these aside. And what I would want to do with these is stretch them out a little bit. And then because we're going to put fillings in them, and I'm going to show you a little tip about how to not to make your fillings fall out, I'm actually going to cut 2 little notches. It's sort of like when you're sewing. You want to be able to stretch a little bit. I'm going to put some ham and cheese in them. And what I'm doing is I'm going right down to kind of that little point. And then the trick will be, you don't need to put a ton of filling in our dough. It's very rich. So as long as you're getting it nice and evenly done, overfilling, it's costly, you don't really need it, and it usually ends up spilling out. So I'm gonna stretch these a little bit, and I'm actually going to fold those little edges in, and then I'm just going to gently roll. And I always want that seam to be on the bottom because we don't want them to unroll. So there we have one. This is our second one. Just roll it on down, make sure that's in the center. And there you have two of the croissant-shaped ones. Now we're going to come over and I'm going to make a couple of the rectangular ones. This time I'm going to do 4-inch by 6-inch. So I've got my 6 inches, would be about half here. I won't have any waste on this one. And 4 inches, I'm going to go across. And if you're working in a warm kitchen, your dough's going to start to rise pretty quickly. So refrigerate what you're not using until you're ready. All right, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to lay out some ham. And if you wanted to, if you want a little bit of color on the top, a little trick, you could do chives or whatever. You can sprinkle a little of something a different color. You could do red or green pepper down here, depending on what your customers like. And you'll see why that's going to show in a second. I'm going to lay my fillings on. I want a good bite of ham, some cheese. When you're working with dough, I was taught that you should always try and have 3 colors. So right now I've got the yellow and the ham and then the herbs, so I'm working with 4, which is good. So what I want to do is I want to roll this, and I actually want to kind of roll that edge down a little bit. That way it won't unroll when it's rising. So I want that seam at the bottom. I'm going to kind of roll it over just a hair, and I'm going to snip 3 little holes in it. Not only are they for steam, but after this rises, it'll really actually show what's in the dough. We're going to put them on parchment on our tray, and we are going to let them proof until they have just doubled in size. And if you need to know different proofing methods, take a look at the tip sheet. And you can either air-proof, proof in a proof box, or with a speed rack and a cover. So here we have our risen, rolled up croissants. And they are just under a 1/2 inch. The really neat thing to watch for with laminated yeast doughs, see where you can just start to see the layering of that butter and dough. That's an indicator that these are ready to bake, and you're going to get beautifully sized, nice honeycomb dough inside and flaky on the outside. Now what we want to do is egg wash them lightly, and then we're going to sprinkle a little bit of herbe de Provence on them, just so we know that they're savory, adds a little color. All the egg wash is doing is adding some shine. It's personal preference. If you still wanted to do the herbs, but you didn't want egg, you could just brush them with a little bit of water, and the herbs will stick. And all I use in my egg wash is equal amounts of egg and water. So an egg is about 1/4 of a cup. That's an easy way to remember it. There we go. They're ready to bake. So here we have our perfectly baked ham and cheese filled croissant. Let's review those steps. We thawed the sheet of croissant dough until it was cold and pliable. We shaped it and filled. Then we let them rise until they were just double in size. We baked them in about a 325-degree oven until they were golden brown. Perfectly baked croissants every time.